Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. My name is Zach Parrish. I'm the programming librarian here at the Bexley Public Library. We've got a wonderful program today, but before we get started, I just want to mention a couple things up top. This is a hybrid program, so we're happy to see all of you here at the library, but we do have an online attendance as well. So at the end, if you have any questions, if you don't mind raising your hand, I will come around with the microphone. That way those online can hear what we're discussing in the room. For anyone joining online, if you want to type any questions or comments into the chat at any time, we will try to get those asked at the end of the presentation. I also want to give a big thank you to Judith Oppenheimer and Jason Crable from the Decorative Art Center of Ohio. They are gracious enough to continue programming with us for the curatorial series that we are able to have these wonderful presentations with the exhibitions that are going on at the Decorative Art Center of Ohio. Today, we are very happy to be joined by Kate Hatcher, who is the Curatorial Assistant. Yes, give it up for Kate. Kate is the Curatorial Assistant at the Canton Museum of Art, where she uses her background in art history to support the curatorial department in research, organization, and implementation of exhibitions and collection management to contribute to the storytelling goals of the exhibitions. She hopes that the themes in Food for Thought, which is currently on display at the Decorative Art Center of Ohio through January 4th. So if you haven't made it out there, put it on your calendar. She hopes that themes in Food for Thought will resonate with many because food plays a major role in our lives and in human connection, helping us to learn more about each other and our various backgrounds, and to make meaningful connections with art. Please join me in welcoming Kate Hatcher.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me, first of all, and thank you, Jason and Judith, for everything. I'm very happy to be here. As mentioned, I will be talking about our exhibit currently at the Decorative Art Center called Food for Thought, A Taste of the Canton Museum of Art, and this will be on display until January 4th. So first of all, nice to meet everybody. My name is Kate. I'm the Curatorial Assistant at the Canton Museum of Art. On the right there is Kaleigh Pisani. She is the Curator of Collections and Registrar at the museum. She is unfortunately sick today, which is why it is just me. But we both worked on this exhibit. We both researched it and developed all the materials. So let's get into it. So just a little bit about our collection. We are located in Canton, Ohio. We have about 1,500 works total, and we focus on American watercolors and ceramics. And our exhibits do rotate about every 3 months or so, based on the exhibits that we bring into the museum. We want everything to sort of be very cohesive and relate to one another, and also just based on themes that we find interesting, which is why we came up with Food for Thought. Some of the artists in our collection that you may recognize: Winslow Homer, Edward Hopper, Andy Warhol, Alice Shilley, just to name a few. So throughout this presentation, we tried to make things as food-themed as we could. So we'll be taking you on courses. First, we're going to focus around the world to sort of contextualize the exhibit. We thought it'd be interesting to place the exhibit in the context of food works throughout art history. So food has appeared in many periods of art history, from ancient tombs to modern galleries. Artists, you'll find, are always interested in food because it's something we can all relate to. They can use food to symbolize wealth and mortality and spiritual beliefs, among many other things. And many of these traits also have influenced American artists and made their way into those artworks. So we'll look at a few works from around the world. Okay, so first we have this painting located on an entire wall in the tomb of Nacht. He was a scribe and astronomer at Thebes. And so you can see this ginormous tomb painting here. And on the top section here, you can see that they are hunting birds. And there's a sort of pile or offering, if you will, of food on the left side. And on the bottom right, we have winemaking shown here. Winemaking became a staple in Egypt and played an important role in many of the ritual aspects in Egypt as well. And because of its importance, winemaking showed up in many tomb paintings, such as this one. So you can see stomping on grapes, picking the grapes, and the bottle is used to store wine. And it was used for quote-unquote spiritual survival. And they felt they needed it in the afterlife. So that's why it is depicted so often in these tomb paintings. Moving on to Italy. This is Rudolph II, depicted as Vertumnus. And Rudolph II was the Roman emperor from 1552 to 1612. Here he's depicted as Vertumnus, the Roman god of seasons, plant growth, as well as fruit and vegetables. This was a commission, and there are some pretty strong political undertones in this work, surprisingly. Because it was a commission, and because Rudolph here is depicted as Vertumnus, the wealth of vegetation making up his body sort of represents the golden era that has returned under the emperor's rule and the abundance of life and plant life that occurred under his rule as well. So very political. This is a great example of food having much more meaning than just being food. There's a lot more than what meets the eye. This work is in the exhibit. You can see it now at the Decorative Arts Center. This is Yucateca con Fruta by Francisco Zuniga. He was a Costa Rican artist, but he depicted many works focusing in on Mexico. The term Yucateca refers to females from the Yucatan in Mexico. Francisco Zuniga was very focused in on matriarchal figures within his work, very dominant, powerful women that take up space in his compositions. And the area of the Yucatan in Mexico is very plentiful with fruits, many different fruit trees, many different plant life and vegetables. And there are many different superstitions and rituals that have to do with these fruit trees. So for example, you can hit orange trees with sandals if they aren't producing fruit. Or you can plant a fig tree next to an open kitchen window because they grow best when they hear gossip. So just to name a few there. So Course 2 focuses on the metaphorical meal. So we're going to continue around the world and then bring it back to the United States. This course focuses on the symbolic messages that many of these works have to offer. A lot of artists will sort of plant these little symbols in their artworks for the viewer to decode. And this is one of my favorite parts about the exhibit, is looking a little closer at some of these works to understand some of the meaning behind them. So continuing around the world, this is a mosaic of an unswept floor from 2nd century AD in Rome. And there's a lot of societal meaning in this work. It goes to show a lot about class and culture here. So these mosaics were very popular with the wealthy back in Rome in this day and age. And they would create mosaics like this to sort of flaunt their wealth. If you look a little closer, you can see some foods that were very rare and expensive and hard to come by, and you can see them just tossed on the floor like garbage in this work, showing that they don't really care about the money. They can just throw the food on the ground like it's nothing. Not to mention that the mosaic would have been very costly to produce, to have an artist literally put this as your flooring. And this can sometimes be interpreted as a memento mori, and you will see this theme come up a lot in art history because it means everything must die. So just like people, food must come to an end. So these are the sort of remnants and the last moments of some food items as well. Okay, I will focus on a few fruits specifically that have deeper meaning when you see them in classical paintings. These fruits appear a lot in religious works as well as mythological works, and this is something that I learned a lot about in my art history classes, sort of looking at these symbols within paintings, because they often mean a lot more. So first, we have the apple. So there are some obvious religious connotations with the apple, with the story of Adam and Eve and temptation. It can also symbolize harvest season when it is seen in artworks. The pear can be seen as a sign of abundance and is referred to as a gift from the god in Homer's Odyssey. It can also symbolize divine fertility because it's often seen in Madonna and child images. The pineapple, interestingly, is a symbol of wealth when you find it in still life paintings, because historically they were very rare and expensive to transport because they came from very far away places and were very difficult to transport and expensive. So when they're seen in still life paintings, they very much so represent status. Cherries can represent the souls of men and are considered the fruits of paradise, and they can also be seen as symbols of desire and temptation. Moving to this painting that I have up right now, the pomegranate can be a reference to the Greek goddess Persephone, who was made to go to the underworld after eating a pomegranate seed. It can oftentimes represent temptation. But in this context up here, this is Virgin and Child with Angels, also known as Madonna of the Pomegranate. You can see the baby Jesus holding an unpeeled pomegranate in his hand. So in this context, it is a symbol of Christ's eventual passion, whose red kernels symbolize the blood shed by Jesus himself. And a lot of times in religious paintings such as this, there will be little symbols to be a premonition of Jesus' death. So an example here is the pomegranate. This work is in the exhibit. This is a German artist. He's one of the only non-American artists we have in the exhibit. This is Still Life by Johann Wilhelm Preyer. And this is inspired by a vanitas painting. So vanitas is a Latin term, which means symbolic of the transience of earthly achievements and pleasures. And they urge the viewer to question morality, and they're often very loaded with symbolism. So some examples in this painting, it looks to be a very pristine, well-curated arrangement of objects, but if you look a little closer, you can see that the acorn is deshelled on the left-hand corner. Some of the grapes are wilted and shriveled, and they're not looking their best. You can see a little bee on the bottom right corner. You can see some of these fruits have blemishes and bruising. And then the wilting, there's some wilting occurring in these leaves attached to the fruit. So even though this looks perfect on the surface, there are many imperfections, symbolizing that everything must die. It's also full of symbolism. The bee on the table and the bubbles in the glass can be symbolic of life's fragility. And the grapes represent worldly pleasures, and the wine represents temptation, and peach represents desire of the flesh. All right, we'll bring it back to America now. This is Apples on a Tin Cup by the American artist William Sidney Mount. So here we can see a shift in the apple's symbolic emphasis. It is no longer representative of religion, but has transitioned to be a symbol of national pride and a very secular meaning. So when William Sidney Mount was an American genre painter, he made works inspired by daily life. And the apple back then was considered to be America's fruit. It was known to be associated with figures like Johnny Appleseed, for example. And it was just seen as a very patriotic, everyday object. So this work features apples atop a tin cup. And these tin cups were the kind that were issued to Union soldiers during the Civil War. This work was created right around the same time as the Civil War. So the cup symbolizes the Union and proclaims faith in the Union. And by juxtaposing these objects and sort of placing the apple on top of the tin cup here, the artist suggests the Union forces literally supporting the country. And interestingly, he created this work to donate to the Metropolitan Fair to benefit the United States Sanitary Commission, which later became the Red Cross, which supported sick and wounded Union soldiers. So it's not hard to make that comparison between what was actually happening and William Sidney Mount's intended purpose of this work. Course 3, we're going to be focusing on still life, all American still life. So the use of still life as decoration became really standard in the 1860s and 1870s. This is when the middle class became a bit wealthier and were able to afford more goods. Therefore, were able to commission artworks to depict their resources and the goods that they were able to acquire. And these works were often placed in the dining room, which is very fitting since this is where you would eat, and therefore the walls would be covered with food-themed works. This is Raphael Peale, Strawberries, Nuts, and Cream. This is not in the exhibit. The Peale family were the first family of American artists. Raphael Peale had many daughters, and most of them, in fact, became artists themselves, which is very interesting. Their work is incredible. I suggest looking them up. But he was known to be the father of American still life painting, and his work really elevates everyday items to the level of high art. He's really memorializing these objects, making them more than just objects, but really idealizing them in quite a lot of ways, and sort of boosting the idea that anyone in the middle class can have access to these goods, this fine china, these luxurious foods out here. And it really celebrates the prosperity of America during this time. This is a more modern still life. This is in the exhibit. This is 76 Special by Gary Irby. You may have seen this on some rack cards and such at the Decorative Art Center promoting this exhibit. This is a modern version of a still life, and here Gary Irby uses food as social commentary. So you may just think this is a work depicting a hot dog with a random dollar bill stuck in it, but this is a comment on hot dogs raising price to $1 in 1976. And it seemed like a large leap. I'm not sure exactly the cost they were beforehand, but to Gary Irby, it was a very large leap in price. And this really refers to the rising costs of food, and it also memorializes this very American object. This is one of my favorites in the exhibit. This is by Martha Mayer Erlbacher, and it's still life number 2. And this is a great example of an artist who challenges the norm of still life painting and doesn't focus on curating an idealized, perfect grouping of objects. Rather, she focuses on the objects taking up space within the composition. She creates more of like a grid-like sort of pattern within the work. She doesn't focus on necessarily depicting realistic color or depicting them in their surroundings. She is solely focused on them taking up space. And you can see this quote that she said herself, that she used still life a lot as a good excuse for exploring space. And I think she did just that. These are very contemporary still life artworks. These are photographs that myself and Kaleigh took ourselves. And I think the days of using still life artwork to depict certain things about your life and about your everyday, the food that you eat, is not over. I think food still can symbolize a lot of things. I can't even tell you how many times I posted very aesthetically pleasing artwork or food dishes to my Instagram stories, just because I think they look very appealing and beautiful. And I'll just go through quickly each of these photographs. So this top left work was taken by Kaleigh, and these are tomatoes she grew in her own garden. And so she was very proud of this accomplishment because she does not really have success with growing vegetables, so this was a very proud moment for her. This top right image, these are 2 pastries that I got when I was visiting my cousin in Cincinnati. And yes, these pastries are very beautiful, but whenever I look at this image, I'm reminded of a very fun, special weekend with my cousin. This bottom left work, this is a latte that I got in Cuyahoga Falls, near where I live. And this was taken with no other purpose other than I just thought it was very beautiful. I wanted to admire and remember the latte art there. And then on the bottom right, this is an Indian dish that Kaleigh made, and she was very proud of all of the tedious work that went into it, so she thought she would document it. So I think you can still see these elements of abundance and success and showing off certain things about food. I don't know if anyone has heard the term letting the phone eat first. I've used this expression shamefully a lot of times. This refers to the trend of taking photos before you actually consume the food, and the point being to maybe share the food on social media, and the priority that some people have over actually documenting their food before actually consuming it. So that just says a lot about our society now, I think. All right, we're gonna be moving forward. This section will focus on the places that we eat our food and the society and atmosphere of food, and the places we eat and the people we eat with as well. Not in the exhibit, obviously. This is Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. Many of you may be familiar with this. And this portrays a late night dining scene in a city. And this has come to be seen as an emblem of urbanized life in wartime. You can see it is very dark outside. There's not a soul walking around the streets. And there's these few people in a diner, and they're very isolated. They're not talking to each other. They're very much in their own space. And this work has really come to seen as a symbol of isolation and loneliness, and reflective of the culture in which it was made. And I think there's a really strong mood that is present in this work. This work is in the exhibit. It is by Clyde Singer, and it's called McSorley's Clock. This is a fairly small work, and it depicts McSorley's old ale house in New York City. This is one of the longest operating bars in America, and it's known for many of its enduring rituals and traditions. It's still, there's still sawdust that's thrown on the floor to mop up spills. It operates on a 2-beer system. There's only one light beer and one dark beer, and you can choose either. And it's cash only, so it's really steeped in a lot of these traditions that have been there since the dawn of its creation. And the walls of the bar are completely adorned with memorabilia. There's Houdini's handcuffs on the walls, various documents from the politicians and celebrities and artists that have entered its doors. And this work just focuses on one of its patrons at the bar drinking a beer. And it depicts some of the adornment of the walls, and I think really speaks to the tradition and history that a dining establishment can have. Not in the exhibit, unfortunately. This is The Night Cafe by Van Gogh. I think this is a very powerful example of an artwork depicting a very strong mood in their work. Here, Van Gogh used very disarming shades of yellow and green and red to depict the environment of a late night bar where some sketchy things probably were going down. He also critiques elements of society in this work. He said, "In my picture of the night cafe, I have tried to express the idea that the cafe is a place where one can ruin oneself, go mad, or commit a crime." And he also said, "I have tried to express the terrible passions of humanity by means of red and green." So I'm really drawn to this image, especially the lights in the top. You can see they're sort of buzzing, and I feel like this is a place that I definitely do not want to go into because of the way that Van Gogh depicted it and depicted the mood inside. This work is in the exhibit. It's by artist Merv Corning. Merv Corning was best known for being the official NFL portraitist for many years. And he also was a great aviation artist. And so he said, "I am trying to depict in this lithograph a national champion who has washed down a bowl of chili with a couple cups of diner coffee as he quietly reflects on this rugged lifestyle that has led him alone down the road." And I think this man's mood is very much reflected by the environment that he is in. You can see the rain coming down outside the windows and the condensation there. It's very run down. If you look closely, you can see that the booth is all scratched up. It's very worn and weathered, just like he is. And And I just get a very strong mood coming from this work. Okay, so our next side dish is the conceptual buffet. So in more recent times, artists have strayed from simply depicting food to imbuing the food with more thought-provoking issues, political issues, social issues, using food as a message that they would like to express. So you may be familiar with these two works, not in the exhibit. This top work is Campbell's Soup Cans by Andy Warhol. And this work famously critiques consumer culture and mass production of foods. And he even would display the soup cans like this to sort of mimic the fact that they would be sitting on shelves in the supermarket, just like you can see up here on the bottom. Sorry, the caption sort of cut off, but this is Cakes by Wayne Thibault. And this, in a similar vein of Andy Warhol's work, he depicts these very ready-made, perfect, pristine cakes that don't seem to be real. They look like there's something a bit off about them. They're sort of precariously perched on these rods, like they might fall over any second. And it comments on American ready-made culture from the 50s and 60s. This is Kara Walker. She's a contemporary artist, and this is A Subtlety, or Marvelous Sugar Baby. This was a site-specific work in 2014, and it took place in an abandoned Domino sugar refinery factory in Brooklyn, New York. And this draws on the history of the sugar industry that relied heavily on slave labor. So this is a commentary on race and colonialism and the intersection between sugar industry and transatlantic slave labor. You can see this woman, she is posed to be sort of like the Sphinx, and there's a lot of really deep messaging here underneath a very sweet casing. This work is made of plastic and refined sugar, so it's meant to be very appealing and sweet on the outside, but very dark and has a lot more meaning when you look a little deeper. And it's also interesting, I just found this out, that A Subtlety, the name of the work, this comes from, in European aristocratic households during the Middle Ages, subtleties were sugar sculptures used as decoration. So this title is very, it juxtaposes the content of this work quite a bit. This is Untitled Portrait of Ross in LA by Felix Gonzalez Torres. This is a 175-pound pile of candy in which visitors are encouraged to take a piece when this is exhibited at a museum. So the meaning of this work comes from Gonzalez Torres' partner. He passed away of AIDS-related complications. And the 175-pound pile comes from his partner weighing 175 pounds at his time of death. And so this work allows the viewer to actively engage in the meaning of the work. Every time they take a piece of candy, it mimics Gonzalez Torres' partner wasting away and eventually passing away. So it allows the viewer to create meaning every time they take a piece of candy. All right, before we jump into the actual exhibit, going through works that are in the exhibit, I thought I'd talk a little bit about our curatorial process at the museum. So our staff at the Canton Museum of Art, there's 9 full-time staff members, and there's 3 of us on the curatorial team. It is myself and Kaleigh, and also Christy, who is the curator of exhibitions at the museum. So all 3 of us, we do all the label writing and the research and the gallery design and even the installation ourselves. So here's just a couple of photos I thought I would include. These are not food for thought related, but I just thought they would be good to throw in to give you a little taste of what we do. On this top left, or this left image, we are hanging a quilt from the ceiling using our scissor lift. The center top image is us uncrating a very large ceramic object a couple years ago. This bottom center image is me installing a salon-style wall of artworks, and a few of the artworks in there are actually in Food for Thought. And then on this right side is our design team. We do all the designing for graphics, but they actually install the vinyl stickers to the wall. And here, if this is going to play. Okay, well, it was a video of me installing artwork. We have a very specific equation that we use whenever we install art because we want everything at a specific eye level. We want the eye level to be 56 inches, so it's very accessible for all of the kids' school groups that come to us and the adults as well. And then we have to make sure everything's level and spaced. And it's my favorite part, actually. I think it's very fun. All right, so we'll get to the meat of it, talk about the exhibit itself. So Food for Thought explores food through the objects, people, and places. These works examine what we eat, how we eat, and who we eat with, creating an intimate look at food and how it plays a role in our lives. So there are 4 groupings within this exhibit. We have In the Garden, Land and Sea, Americana, and the Rituals of Food. And each of these themes take up a room at the Decorative Arts Center. Our first one is In the Garden. So gardens have captivated artists throughout art movements, throughout centuries. They often speak to artists for their tranquility. Many artists paint on plein air, which means outdoors, using portable paints such as watercolors in order to depict the changing light and atmosphere that occurs outside. So I'll take you through a few of these. So first we have In the Garden. This is by Romare Bearden. He was an African-American artist, and he often depicted some African-American experiences throughout his childhood that he had growing up. As a child, he spent summers with his grandparents in Charlotte, and the memories of those cities' backyard gardens lingered on his mind throughout most of his body of work. So you can see here, there's a woman walking through a garden with a basket of, I believe, some sort of fruit. And this really harkens back to his childhood growing up. So there's a lot of his own very vibrant memories that are in this work. And there's also a slight commentary on socioeconomic status here. You can see that her dress is ragged, she's walking barefoot, and it makes you wonder what the story of this work might be. This is by a ceramic artist named Claude Conover, and this is Tlalouk. It is a garden seat. And he was known for his stoneware works that were inspired by ancient cultures. So he would very often name his ceramics very ancient-sounding names, Tlalouk being one of them. And he would also create his works so that they have a very weathered and ancient visual appearance. If you see this work in person, you'll see it looks very scratched up and weathered, and there's all these very prominent incised marks all around its surface, and he did this intentionally to make it seem ancient. So the name of this work, Tlalouk, is from Aztec culture. Tlalouk is the god, or the ruler of rain, I should say. So it's very fitting that this work would sit in a garden and bless the garden with rain so that it can provide a bounty. This is Santa Clara Pueblo Seed Pot by the Santa Clara artist Robert Naranjo. So Santa Clara pottery is famous for producing handcrafted works, specifically blackware and redware. This is a blackware work, and many of their blackware works feature some portions of the design that are matte and some that are very shiny and reflective. And oftentimes they would create decorations that were very symbolic. Sometimes they would include these decorations that were supposed to be reminiscent of storm clouds and lightning and rain. And for their culture, clay was considered to be mother clay. They believed it had a soul and a deity almost. And this is a seed pot, like I said, so they were designed to protect the seeds for next year's planting from rodents and bugs, and often the opening at the top would be very, very small to prevent anything from getting into it and ruining the seeds or eating the seeds. And when the time came to plant the seeds, the pots would be smashed. This is just for decoration. You can see the opening is a bit larger, so this would not be used to actually store seeds. This is Still Life by William Sommer. William Sommer was a modernist artist who lived in Cleveland for a majority of his life. He was also a very prominent lithographer, so he would create these very sharp black lines that are very, they're reminiscent of lithography and printmaking. He would often paint directly in and from nature, and he would let the outdoors immerse him. And here, he doesn't depict the garden directly, but he depicts the bounty that came from the garden. So you can see some pears and some apples and some grapes. And he uses this very modernist, distinct style. So you can see that the perspective is a little bit skewed. There's this very bold black line that's surrounding many of the objects. And it's almost cubist in some portions, with like the angular figures, and very modernist, so very much breaking away from a lot of these traditional still life procedures. All right, our next category is land and sea. Artists found compelling subject matter in the farming practices of land and sea. And here they would depict a lot of the workers and faces behind food production. So you'll see a lot of these that I will talk about. And many artists would depict the industrial changes that occurred during their lifetime. So manual labor to mechanized farming, and sort of documenting these changes in society. So this first work is Thomas Hart Benton, Island Hay. And this work depicts a farming scene on Martha's Vineyard. He would often create art in this location. And this shows the hardworking American farmer. So Thomas Hart Benton was a regionalist painter, also known as American scene painting. So he would depict a very idealized and version of America, depicting the hardworking people and the patriotic values, and really shedding a great light on American culture and society. So here, this is a very, in my opinion, realistic of what a grueling day of labor would look like in the fields for these farmers. There's these very turbulent, swirling skies above that I think are really mimicking the hard work that is occurring here in the field. If you look closer, you can see that there's these men have very focused, grueling facial expressions, showing the hard work that's going on here. In contrast, this depicts farm work, farm labor in a very different way. So this, in my opinion, is a much more idealized version of farm life. The artist, Frank English, does not focus directly on the hard work that occurs every day in these locations, but rather he focuses on the beauty of the landscape. There's a romantic quality to this work. It's very hazy and beautiful, and it looks very serene, when in real life that's probably not the way that this would look. And it also focuses on the horses instead of the human laborers. You can see that there's a mechanical reaper in the background. So this was invented around 1831, and it made wheat harvesting much, much easier and faster than hand-cutting methods. So this is an example of the changing mechanization of farming. This is Log Milk House. It is by Martha Burlingham. Martha Burlingham would paint from memory. She would never paint on site. So she would travel extensively with her husband and would come home and record these very colorful, vibrant scenes from memory. And this is a log milk house. This is a location before refrigeration where milk would be stored and kept free from dust and smells and dirt. And it would be located on a farm in a lane that would be easy for pickup if there were customers to purchase the milk. And this is an example of folk art. So she was not classically trained. You can see that there are just strokes of like unmodulated color. And it looks like a memory. You know, there's a lot going on. It's a little blurry and hard to focus in on details. And yeah, I really like this one. Okay, our next theme is Americana. So Americana is a term that's used a lot in art to refer to works that celebrate American culture and the history and traditions that take place here. And the art of Americana evokes a sense of nostalgia for a particular era or memory, and it presents a very romanticized version of American life. And it aims to create a sense of national identity by focusing in on by topical items and places that everyone might know. So for example, ice cream parlors, hot dogs, diners, these are all examples of Americana. This is another work by Merv Corning. It's called Frenchie and the Pastry Chef. This work was done, it depicts Lubach's restaurant in San Diego. This is a restaurant where Merv Corning and his wife would frequent. This, as you can see in this quote, it was painted as a gift for his wife, probably for their anniversary. He said, "What a cheapskate." And he said, we also stopped there for lunch during our visits to San Diego. It seemed like such a special treat, a couple of Manhattans, crab salad for Tula, and a nice New York cut steak for me. In those days, the waiter would make your salad at the table, and the baker would roll out the dessert cart after lunch. What a time. I think this work really speaks to an era that has passed of personal connection happening when you visit a restaurant, at waiters giving you this amazing treatment, and the bakers that roll the cart by, and very personal connections. I don't think that's something that is as common in this day and age, and focuses on the worker instead of the food itself. This is Market Diner by John Bader. The diner has been come to be seen as a symbol of American culture. John Bader is to thank for this. He has become known as a painter of diners because he would make very frequent road trips when he was in college, and along the way he would stop at a different diner, and he would interview the staff and the patrons, and he would order a meal, and he would sketch the different diners and then go home and depict them in lithographs and paintings. And he really helped to make the diner a symbol of American culture that we know it to be today. His focus on diners helped to develop this image into an American icon. And I think this is just a very immersive work. I think we all have examples of diner memories. They're very cozy feeling for me, stepping into a diner, ordering some coffee, and sitting at a booth. And it's just something that's very Americana, something we all can relate to. This is Blue and Gold, Hoegaardens, by Ray Kleinlein. This just depicts 2 bottles of Hoegaarden beer, and his paintings really embrace human culture and the material world by really paying reverence to everyday objects, such as this one. So when he was 9 years old, his family home burned down to the ground, and he lost every single object that he loved. And so ever since then, he has aimed to depict everyday objects with a lot of reverence and beauty, and focusing in on these small details of the object that we may not notice otherwise. And yes, this is a German beer, but there are many German communities in Ohio and in America, and beer is so central to a lot of American events, you know, sporting events, that sort of thing. So this is a very Americana image. This is Ferdinand Brader, and this is George Dilger's brewery. This has become a favorite of Food for Thought because of all the incredible details that are in this work. So Ferdinand Brader he was an immigrant from Switzerland, and he moved here to Ohio and would move from farm to farm to commemorate people's homes and farms and businesses, and would often trade them for room and board. And these are very large artworks. So believe it or not, he would draw these outside, every single one of them. He would create them on plein air with a large drawing board and his pencils. And he really creates this panoramic look at what life was like in the 19th century. Like I said, commemorates life back then and all of these businesses and homes and people. So like I said, this depicts a brewery that was located in Louisville, Ohio, and was open from 1882 to 1897. And he really immerses his viewers in these incredible small details. I really encourage you all to visit the exhibit and really get close to this work to look at all of the amazing details. There's people playing games. There's actually a horse. Let me see if I can. There's a horse and buggy here depicting or hauling some cans of beer. There's kids playing in the street. There's just a lot of really amazing details that really immerse you in what life was like back then. And he would always title his works with the name of the business or the residents and the people who lived there and commissioned the work. Okay, and our last theme here is the rituals of food. So rituals, food-related rituals are steeped in each and every one of our lives. I know I have many that I use in my day-to-day life. Drinking coffee in the morning, even preparing a meal can be seen as a ritual that you can do with food. And these rituals can be solitary, such as, like I said, drinking coffee in the morning, or they can be communal, such as going to a dinner party or a garden party. And a lot of these rituals help to bring us comfort and help to really set a foundation for our day and for our life. And the objects used in the rituals of food often blend art and functionality, with artists frequently incorporating innovative designs, and they really transform these everyday items into beautiful works of art. So I'll go through a few. This is a Columbus artist, actually, Edmund Kuhn, and this is Summertime. So this is a very abstract work. He doesn't really focus on small details. He sort of creates washes of color, and he doesn't even give these people facial expressions or facial details, which I think really adds to the nostalgia of the work, and it allows us to place our loved ones into this scene. And this really harkens to the importance of gathering and family traditions. You can see this family is sitting around peeling apples. There's some members that are not doing as much work. This one on the left, just laying down, eating an apple. So this is an example of just an everyday ritual, sitting down with family and friends, spending time together, peeling apples, it's the things we don't even think about that are so ingrained in our lives. This is Black Blouse by Richard Siegelman. And he was known for his depictions of solitary women, often having a very melancholic facial expression. Here, this woman is looking out a window very longingly, and she's drinking a cup of coffee. So this is very immersive to me because this is something that I partake in every single day, often a few times a day. And it's a very grounding and peaceful experience for me to make a cup of coffee in the morning, drink it by myself, reflect on the day ahead. And this is just something that I think a lot of people can really relate to. This is King Winter by Andrew Wyeth. This is another one of my favorites in the exhibit. For those of you who don't know, he was a beloved realist painter known for his depictions of American life and culture. This depicts King Winter, who was the German embodiment of the holiday spirit and of Christmas. So he's very similar to like a Santa Claus figure. And in this work, he looks very jolly and regal. He's wearing a crown, and he's holding a chalice, which looks to me to be of wine. And this speaks to the nostalgic holiday rituals that so many of us partake in. I, for one, have a lot of Christmas memories, and this just makes me think of a lot of those. And I think that's something inherent in all of our lives, partaking in these holiday rituals. And this was a Christmas card. Andrew Wyeth and his family would often create little Christmas cards to send out to family and friends. So this was intended to be one of them. These are just a few ceramic objects in the exhibit. And these are some objects that are used in the rituals of food. And they blend art and functionality very wonderfully. And like I said, our exhibit, our museum focuses our ceramics and watercolors, so we do have many, many beautiful ceramics in our collection, many of them being Ohio artists. So yeah, these are some ceramic works that are used and intended to be part of rituals. So on this top left, this is a soup tureen. On the top right is a casserole dish, which is a very Ohio thing. I'm sure many of you have enjoyed a casserole or two. The bottom left is a punch bowl. And the bottom right, there's a table set, so a little container for sugar and creamer and so on. And these objects really enhance the ritual experience with their beauty, but they're also very functional. We also have a grouping of tea bowls in the exhibit. They're all placed beautifully on a large table within the rituals room. So tea bowls were used in tea ceremonies, which originated in China, but were brought to Japan by Japanese monks. The tea ceremony is a very meditative process. It's a time for you to slow down and be with friends and family and use this intricate series of movements performed in a very strict order. And in many of these locations where you would do this tea ceremony, the doorways were very short, so you had to physically bow to pay reverence to the experience and to the hosts. And they were held to appreciate the ritual of serving tea, focusing on the core principles of harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. So here are just 4 beautiful examples of some tea bowls. This is just a closer look at that soup tureen. Just some fun facts. The soup tureen originated in France as a communal serving piece, and they were actually passed from person to person around the table. So that's why many of them have handles such as this, so that you don't burn your hands while passing. And objects like this really encourage human connection and communal activities and routines such as this. And they were usually decorated very ornately to symbolize status and wealth, which is something that just pops up over and over in this presentation and in food-themed works overall. This is the punch bowl, closer look at that punch bowl. Punch became popular in the 17th century because sailors wanted to make rum taste better, so they would create a concoction of many other ingredients to make rum taste better. And then they brought that idea to Europe, and then so on and so forth. And the punch bowl brought men together. It was a communal bowl where you had to physically walk to get your punch and socialize with the other people around the punch bowl. So just another example of a dish that supports like community ties and human connection. All right, so I threw a lot at you there. Just in conclusion, artists have used food to tell stories about culture and identity and emotion throughout history, across time and geography. What and how we eat reveals who we are and says a lot about our beliefs and values. And art can transform the everyday act of eating into a reflection on life, memory, and meaning. So as you leave, I'd like you to consider, what does the food you love say about your story? So thank you, everyone, and hope you have a wonderful day. Are there any questions?
Well, Kate, thank you so much. This was a wonderful
Thank you.
presentation, and I hope we all can find time to make our way over to the Decorative Arts Center of Ohio to check out the Food for Thought exhibit, or
Please do.
venture up north to Canton to check out the museum up there.
We'd love to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.